Now, moving on, the US government has shelved punitive tariffs on India and 5 other countries, including the UK, which intend to levy digital services tax on e-commerce companies. Now, the 25% duties that have not been imposed target Britain, India, Austria, Italy, Spain and Turkey. The tariffs have instead been suspended for 6 months, while the US works to resolve a dispute over digital services tax. United States Trade Representative Katherine Tai had announced that the conclusion of the one-year investigations of Section 301 digital service taxes, the investigations aim to impose additional tariffs on certain goods from these countries. Trade authorities ruled the tariffs were justified. But quoting Katherine Tai here, the US remains committed to reaching a consensus on international tax issues through the OECD and G20 processes, and the US is focused on finding a multilateral solution to a range of key issues related to international taxation. The US Trade Representative has not ruled out imposing tariffs under Section 301 if warranted in the future. Now, the investigation was initiated last year in June under the Trump administration, which had raised concerns on certain trading partners adopting tax schemes designed to unfairly target big tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Google and Facebook. Digital services tax adopted by Austria, India, Italy, Spain, Turkey and UK were found discriminatory and inconsistent with the principles of international taxation. And tariffs were announced on 6 countries, including India, that have imposed or are considering equalization levy on e-commerce companies. Biden's administration is pushing for a 15% global minimum corporate tax that aims to resolve the issue of corporations sheltering profits in low-tax nations. Now, the decision also comes just ahead of the 2-day G7 meeting, where a deal on the tax issue will likely be hammered. Now, officials would try to win broader support from the G20 and 38-member Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Once again, going back to our WION correspondent Jagriti Dave from Washington, D.C. Now, the US government has shelved these punitive tariffs on India and the other 5 countries. These intend to levy digital services tax on e-commerce companies. Could you just explain this to our viewers and its implications?
Yeah, I think this is a process that I think a lot of scrutiny is happening around the world in many countries looking at digital taxation, actually scrutiny on tech giants. And the United States is arguing that this is the taxes imposed by countries like the UK, in Spain, India and other countries are unfair, and that they discriminate against US social media companies. And so the US is threatening to tax around $2 billion worth of goods, put tariffs on $2 billion worth of goods. So this is a huge amount of money we're talking about. And these tariffs, I think the suspension of these tariffs is seen in general as an indication that the US is willing to negotiate and willing to talk rather than engage in a cycle of tit-for-tat tariffs that we saw the previous administration engaged in with Europe, with China, to give examples. And so I think digital taxes is one of those key issues that is being discussed by the EU, by the G7 and by the OECD and G20 nations. And that is something that I think we're going to see movement on when those meetings in the G7 with the finance ministers, when they meet in London later on.
Right. I was just going to come to that actually. Now that, as I mentioned, the decision also comes just ahead of the 2-day G7 meeting where this deal on the tax issue is likely to be hammered. What can we expect?
Yeah, I think there's a general sense that all these countries want to come to some sort of agreement on how digital services should be taxed. I think nobody wants to embark on a cycle of tit-for-tat taxations. So I think the expectation is, or the hope at least, is that the finance ministers at the G7 meeting will come to some kind of agreement which will then be officially made into an official agreement later on. But I think there is real hope that because there is a sense from all sides that they don't want to embark on tit-for-tat taxes, tit-for-tat tariffs, I beg your pardon, that there will be some kind of resolution on this front that can be achieved.
All right, Jagriti, thank you so much for joining us. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.